Now, we've talked a lot tonight about converge, and it's time for you to really understand exactly what that word means. And to do that with us, it's really wonderful that we have with us Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg. Now, that's a name that will be familiar to anybody who is with us in either of the cities and in Melbourne who have teenage children, because Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg has probably spoken to more parents of teenage kids than anybody else in this country. He's helped many of us survive the teenage years. But in addition to doing that, he's also an incredible behavioural psychologist who has used his expertise in the workplace as well as he has in family lives. So Marriott International has partnered with Dr. Carr-Gregg, and his research has really now focused on the mental impact of remote working and the changing needs of the workforce and those pillars of life that we've been talking about. And it is my great pleasure to introduce him to you all now. Dr. Carr-Gregg, are you there?
Our lives have been significantly impacted by COVID-19. And like many other businesses, Marriott International has been concerned with the mental health impacts the pandemic has had on associates, guests, and the community. I'm Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg, corporate psychologist, and I've partnered with Marriott Bonvoy events to research the impact of the global pandemic on remote working and isolation. Together, we've developed C.O.N.V.E.R.G.E. Throughout the hotels, Marriott Bonvoy events will be providing offerings which aim to improve the meetings and events experience under the 8 pillars of the C.O.N.V.E.R.G.E. mindfulness program. Catch some Zs and focus on getting a healthy night's sleep. Oxygenate the brain and get the body moving. Nutriate and have your mood respond to your food. Explore your vision and purpose. Engage mindfully throughout the day. Foster new connections with random acts of kindness. Set the tone of your day by practicing gratitude. Experience something new and stay curious. And we look forward to hosting you for meetings, events and more under the C.O.N.V.E.R.G.E. program. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Sophie and Matt and Sean, for your inspirational stories. There certainly is power in the narrative. So welcome. I'm coming to you from the W Melbourne, where Damon and Kerry have looked after me very, very nicely. So today, to put it in context, we're talking about the mental health impact of what's been happening around the world. COVID-19 definitely turned all our lives upside down and asked us to navigate a new reality of remote working, remote learning, and of course more time at home and away from our workmates. All, unfortunately, the sort of mental health indicators got worse. Emergency presentations went up, the helplines basically ran hot, incidents of self-harm were increasing, and mental health professionals began to see this as the second curve, the shadow pandemic. But working together with my business partner, Bridget Johnson, who is based in Brisbane and who happens to be one of Australia's leading executive coaches, we've partnered with Marriott International and come up with a marvellous new template, which I think is going to help heal not just all the people who come to the hotels, but also the conferences as well. So they're based on the idea of positive psychology, which was first coined by a psychologist back in 1954 called Abraham Maslow. And the principles of positive psychology were popularized by Professor Martin Seligman in 1998. And what he did was revolutionize practical psychology, brought a scientific method to the understanding of what made people happy, what actually increased well-being. Up until then, psychology was based on a sort of deficit model, what was wrong. And we now know through positive psychology, it's almost 17 years old, and understand what leads people to live more meaningful lives and to develop really fabulous strategies for increasing their happiness and their productivity. So one way that we can do this to counter the social isolation and the loneliness and the harm that was done by the various lockdowns and the financial hardship we all endured was to understand that humans are innately social. We all need human connection. And Converge is really about finding creative ways to connect people, to rebuild their well-being, to increase their resilience, that capacity to face, to confront, to be transformed and strengthened by the adversity that we've all had. So the idea behind Converge is these 8 pillars, the first of which basically relate, as they all do, to well-being. And I don't know if you know this, but Shakespeare called sleep the chief nourisher in life's feast, balm of their mind, great nature's second course. And we know it's the single most important behavioural experience you'll ever have. The average person will spend 36% of their life asleep, which means if you are fortunate enough to live to 90, you'll have spent 32 years of your life asleep, which is fantastic for your brain. Despite its importance, it's amazing. Most people don't think very much about sleep. We take it for granted. But in fact, sleep and your well-being, your mental health, are incredibly closely connected. Sleep deprivation profoundly affects your psychological health. And my idea is that we actually create, through Marriott International, the perfect conditions for you to have a great night's sleep. We can use the principles of sleep hygiene, and Marriott International will become the first corporation to really put into place the science of a great night's sleep. Unfortunately, the Sleep Health Foundation of Australia tells us that 60% of Australians experience at least one sleep issue 3 or more times a week. So we're not very good at sleep. The secret, of course, is to sleep in a place which is dark and quiet and cool. The ideal temperature, it turns out, for most people is about 20 degrees. Some of us sleep in too warm a room. So sleep is the first sort of pillar of well-being. The second is around oxygenating your brain. So essentially exercise. And I'm afraid as a nation, we've been going backwards as far as exercise is concerned. 85% of us do not meet the recommended targets for physical activity and exercise. Guidelines put out on May the 7th, 2021 by the federal government. Regular exercise, it turns out, has a profoundly positive impact on our well-being. It actually is listed by Beyond Blue as a standard treatment now for depression and anxiety. And you don't have to run a marathon. The research tells us that 30 minutes a day of moderate activity on most days is sufficient. And the benefits are extraordinary from a psychological point of view. It can relieve your stress, improve, believe it or not, your memory. It helps people sleep better, and it boosts their overall mood. I always say that exercise is a celebration of what your body can do, not a punishment for what you ate. And I think that's a good thought. So we're going to look at ways in which we can encourage people just to do that half an hour of moderate exercise on a regular basis to improve your well-being. So you've got the two fundamentals of well-being so far, sleep and exercise. The third, of course, is nutrition. And the greatest paradigm shift in my career, in my experience, in fact, the greatest paradigm shift of our time in psychological and medical thinking is, in fact, a focus bizarrely on the bacteria that lives in our gut, known as our microbiota, and mental health. There is, in fact, a connection between food and mood, and it has rocketed to the forefront of modern medicine and psychology. The vision that I have for Marriott International is that we use the principles of the latest research done at Deakin University by the Food Mood Centre, pioneered by Professor Felice Jacka, and we can create the only food mood menu in the world, and that would be quite something, just to underpin our desire to help people's mental health and help them recover from what they've been through. So nutrition. The next one is vision and purpose. Now, this might sound a little bit airy-fairy, but the research shows that having a connection to something bigger than ourselves, and that can be religious beliefs or just your spiritual side, is absolutely connected to your well-being long term. We know that people who have meaning and purpose in their lives are, from a research perspective, way happier, feel more in control, and get much more out of what they do. Now, I'm not talking here necessarily just about religiosity. If you happen to be a person of faith, fantastic. But this can be about a connection to a movement, a political party, something that you desperately believe in and that you think is important to you. And unfortunately, the term spiritual anorexics comes to mind when I look at most of my clients. Very few of them believe in anything or have a connection to anything. And yes, I would even settle to a connection to a football club if that's your particular thing. The next, and probably one of the most important and easy to do pillars of well-being, relates to the idea of learning how to be fully present and engaged in the moment, aware of your thoughts and your feelings without being distracted, without judging yourself. It's so simple. There's an organization that I used to be on the board of called Smiling Mind, and that's a little app that you can download. And just taking 5 minutes a day to take a seat, find a place which is calm and quiet, just for you to set yourself a little time limit. And you can start with five minutes. Just notice your body, feel your breath, and notice when your mind has wandered. There is now really good research that this little practice that you can incorporate into your life can dramatically improve your well-being. So that's obviously going to be one of the pillars. Then we talk about random acts of kindness. And again, this is pretty counterintuitive, but the research is quite clear that helping others isn't just good for you, it's also good for the people you helped. It makes the person doing the kindness happier and healthier as well. Being kind to other people, doing just a simple random act of kindness each day connects us to others. It creates obviously stronger communities and workplaces and contributes to building a happier society for everyone. The really interesting thing is that when we document this in psychology, we find that the more random acts of kindness you do in your day, the lower your blood pressure and the lower your cortisol, the stress hormone. And of course, interestingly, the research says that more you do, the longer you live, the healthier you are, and particularly important for someone like me, it slows down the aging process. So I'll try and do at least 3 random acts of kindness a day. And it can be as little as letting someone in the traffic. The next one is gratitude. And again, very counterintuitive, but the research shows strongly and consistently this simple act of acknowledging the good things in your life is associated with much better well-being. Neuroscientists have found that gratitude activates different areas of the brain, including those affiliated with forming special bonds, social bonds. But more than that, it improves the quality of your sleep, reduces stress, and increases our sense of well-being, boosts your immunity, and generally gives you a sense of satisfaction. When we express gratitude, our brain releases dopamine and serotonin. And there's a neat little trick that you can do, a little ritual that you can start today for yourself and for your family. It's called the what went well and why technique. So every night before you go to bed, just jot down 3 good things that happened to you each day, what went well and why. And the research shows that people who do this on a regular basis, again, have increased levels of well-being. The next one is experiencing something new. Again, quite counterintuitive. Learning affects our well-being in lots of really positive ways. It turns out that learning new things exposes us to new ideas and, of course, helps us stay curious and engaged, which really lights up our brain. It also gives us a sense of accomplishment and helps boost our self-confidence and our resilience. So the challenge for you, the challenge for Marriott International will be to incorporate and operationalize these 8 pillars of well-being. It's very, very exciting to be involved. I'm delighted, Bridget and I are both delighted to have been invited to participate in this, frankly, new psychological experiment. And I'd be very happy to take any questions now from the assembled in Brisbane or Sydney. Thanks very much.
Hey there. I'm the first question. Thank you, Doctor. That was amazing. Michelle Sargent from CWT. We're in rooms at the moment with event professionals who are always putting people above themselves and doing things for others. My question to you is, out of those 8 pillars, which one do you feel we should highlight for ourselves?
I'm going to have to say sleep because particularly
Hello.
when... Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, good. So I'd have to answer sleep is probably the most important thing. What the latest research tells us is that when you're asleep, parts of your brain are actually more active than when you're awake. So sleep actually, it's almost like it cleans out all the toxins. There's a part of your brain called the glymphatic system. And when you get a good night's sleep, the cerebrospinal fluid flows through your brain, washing out all the toxins and restores your brain and allows you to have the energy to take on the next day. Now, I can imagine that if you are an events professional and you do put people first all the time, that can be quite draining. So in order to face the next day, get a good night's sleep. And by the way, we're talking about 8 hours would be ideal for adults. At the moment in Australia, most adults are getting about 6 hours. So one trick to help you sleep is to make sure you dim the lights in your room about half an hour before you go to bed. This actually enables your sleep chemical, melatonin, to get a bit of a head start, and you'll get a really good night's sleep. So there's a trick for you.
Thank you. I'm not sure how many of us are getting 8 hours a night when we're on an event, but our 4 hours we will appreciate greatly and do our very best for you. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Well, Dr. Greg Carr, I go to bed at 8 o'clock pretty much every night because I have no life. My question to you is, because food is so central to what we do, how do we best create an opportunity for our planners to deliver great nutrition to our attendees?
Well, my dream would be that we look at what the science tells us is really good for our mood. And we're talking about, interestingly, a Mediterranean type diet. So tuna and salmon in particular are standouts. We know too that the research says that eggs and healthy vegetables and fruit are absolute mainstays of a good mood. And unfortunately, many Australians eat a lot of high fat, high sugar, high processed food. And it turns out that that actually is very bad for your mental health. And certainly, if you already have anxiety and depression, the research suggests that that's only going to make it worse. So, some of the really interesting research from the Food Mood Centre shows that if we change diet, you can actually have the protective factors, but it also can be part of your treatment. So that's what I would say to you. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Don from Events Beyond. My question as well comes back to the staff in general and what we can do to support the Converge philosophy within our workplaces leading up to an event. Obviously, we can't sleep in the office or control the food, but what elements of Converge can we do, and do you have any techniques that could be employed in an office environment to promote this philosophy?
I think the gratitude is a standout for me. I have been using this technique of just seeing life as it is, but focusing on the good bits. Now, here in Melbourne, obviously we're just about to go into a 7-day lockdown. And for the last 17 years, I've been doing a little spot on a radio station, and the host asked me on Wednesday what piece of advice that I would give people in this very difficult situation that we were about to be in, and that now we're in. And that is to see life as it is and focus on the good bits. The other sort of philosophical technique that I would use is this. I would say to you, particularly in a work environment and a pressured work environment, you often can't choose what happens to you, but you can always choose how you respond to it and how you think about it. So this is a really important philosophy and a technique that we can use in a workplace. And that is, if you can't change something, change the way you think about it. Thanks for your question.
Amazing, thank you.
Hi, Dr. Greg Carr. Michael Greg Carr.
So, Dr. Carr-Gregg, the question from Brisbane is, with experience new things, are you referring to experiencing small things, or are you talking about larger coursework, or maybe going and doing some extra study, or embracing something completely different and new?
Great question. So no, I'm actually talking about both the little things and the big things. So what the research showed was during, for example, the last 2 lockdowns we had in Melbourne, the people who decided just to do a little YouTube tutorial on digital photography benefited as much as the people who decided to do a certificated course online that took a couple of weeks. What you have to remember is you have 100 billion brain cells, 1,000 trillion connections, and in order to keep them active and healthy, learning new things creates new pathways, and that keeps your brain healthy, curious, and engaged. So it can be little, can be big.
Does anybody else have a question? Dr. Carr-Gregg, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us tonight and for making your way into the W Hotel, albeit just with a couple of friends and not an entire room. But having you speak with us tonight has been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have one more question in Sydney, if we can, or have we... He's gone.